Everyone thinks they know what history looks like on screen: corsets, plagues, powdered wigs, and the occasional revolution. But most so-called historical dramas are one part fact, two parts fantasy, and a generous scoop of melodrama. But what happens when a show gets history almost painfully right? Which dramas ditch the fairy tales and serve up reality, grit, and all? Buckle up, because some of these shows will change the way you see the past, forever. Ready to see history with no filter? Chernobyl 2019. No show has ever made a government cover-up feel this claustrophobic. Chernobyl is the period drama that puts most others to shame. Forget the based on true events fudge. This miniseries reconstructs the 1986 disaster with forensic precision, right down to the cracks in the control room walls and the paint peeling in the Soviet hallways. You feel the dread creeping in with every radiation reading and bureaucratic shrug. Production designer Luke Hall scoured thousands of real photos, blueprints, and even survivor interviews to capture the exact shade of institutional decay. The scripts are rooted in actual testimony from those who lived it: scientists, firemen, and the families who got caught in the fallout. Even the infamous graphite scene, that horrifying black powder on the roof, is exactly as described by witnesses. But the magic isn't just in the props or the haircuts. It's in the cold, bureaucratic language, the way no one wants to be the one to say, "This is bad." It's in the way the show refuses to blink during its ugliest moments. Chernobyl doesn't just ask, "What happened?" It asks, "Who paid the price?" The answer isn't pretty. It's so accurate, survivors said watching it was like reliving a nightmare. Historians nitpicked only minor details, like accents, not events. If you want comfort food, look elsewhere. If you want the scariest true story of the 1980s, and a lesson in what happens when pride trumps truth, Chernobyl is the gold standard. John Adams 2008. Step aside, founding father cliches. John Adams is here to ruin the tidy myth of the American Revolution. No cherry trees or glowy hero worship, just the dirt, sweat, and monumental anxiety of building a new country from scratch. HBO's miniseries is famously brutal with its accuracy. Actors are slathered in period-appropriate grime and sport teeth that look like they belong in a museum exhibit, not on a Hollywood set. Paul Giamatti isn't just playing Adams as a wise old statesman. He's insecure, stubborn, sometimes even downright annoying, which, if you dig into Adams' real letters, is exactly how his peers saw him. The series lifts dialogue from actual correspondence and congressional records. The world isn't cleaned up either. You'll see pockmarks, missing teeth, bloodletting, and wigs so unwashed they could declare independence on their own. Every frame feels painstakingly researched. Locations were picked to match real-life sites. Costumes dyed with natural materials from the era, designed using actual 18th century methods. Even the political debates are reconstructed from first-hand accounts, making you feel the stakes in every shouting match. Laura Linney's Abigail Adams is equally detailed. She's a political partner, not a prop, trading letters with John full of advice, warnings, and practical support. By the end, you feel like you've lived the growing pains of America, not just watched a glossy highlight reel. If you want the real birth of a nation, warts and all, John Adams delivers. Forget the fireworks. This is the bumpy, thrilling, exasperating ride that actually got us here. Wolf Hall, 2015. Forget everything you know about Tudor England. Wolf Hall tears up the usual script and goes straight for the shadows. Gone are the technicolor gowns and over-the-top love triangles. What you get instead is a moody, almost suffocating immersion into the politics of Henry VIII's court, shot in flickering candlelight and set in rooms that feel genuinely cold. Mark Rylance plays Thomas Cromwell as less of a villain and more of a survivor. This is a man who doesn't swagger. He listens, plots, and always stays 3 moves ahead. The dialogue? Clipped, careful, and lifted straight from historical documents and Hilary Mantel's award-winning novels, which themselves are masterpieces of research. Even the silences feel tense, like every whispered word could be your last. The costumes aren't just accurate, they're works of obsession. Every stitch, every drape of cloth comes from real Tudor patterns, dyed with ancient techniques and tailored by hand. The series doesn't waste time on modernizing or making things pretty. You see the dirt on the hems, the sweat on the brows, the quiet desperation behind every gesture. Filmed in actual Tudor-era buildings, the series oozes authenticity. The candlelit interiors, the narrow staircases, the muddy streets outside, all remind you just how precarious life was. Political danger feels real. Even the food looks historically accurate, and you'll notice a distinct lack of anachronistic hairdos. Wolf Hall is history without the storybook filter. It's tense, sometimes even chilly, and refuses to dumb things down. If you want a Tudor drama that respects your intelligence and your curiosity, Wolf Hall is essential viewing. Band of Brothers, 2001. World War II dramas usually try to make you cry or cheer. Band of Brothers skips the cheap shots and just lets history do the heavy lifting. Every muddy foxhole, every frostbitten finger, every awkward silence around a campfire, this series recreates Easy Company's journey across Europe in a way that feels more documentary than drama. What makes it stand out? For starters, the cast spent weeks in actual boot camp, eating the same bland rations, suffering through the same miserable weather, and learning the tactics used by real paratroopers. The showrunners brought in veterans as consultants. Dialogue was lifted from diaries and interviews, and almost every event, from the jump into Normandy to the frozen siege at Bastogne, happened exactly as portrayed. The attention to detail is borderline obsessive. Helmets are battered, uniforms are mismatched, and nobody's hair looks freshly cut. You can smell the mud, the gun oil, and the fear. Even the minor characters, guys who appear in just one episode, are based on real people with real stories. The result is a show that doesn't glamorize war, but also doesn't sanitize it. It's no surprise veterans who watched Band of Brothers called it the closest thing to being back in the trenches. It's not about action for action's sake. It's about survival, camaraderie, and the way war leaves its mark on everyone. If you want a war drama that respects its subjects and its audience, Band of Brothers is as real as it gets, and it will stay with you long after the credits roll. Deadwood, 2004-2006. Think you know the Wild West? Deadwood dares you to forget everything you learned from Saturday morning cowboy flicks. This isn't tumbleweeds and shootouts every 10 minutes. This is the dirt, the desperation, and the daily grind of building a town from nothing. And it's all pulled from real history, not Hollywood legend. Creator David Milch and his writers rebuilt Deadwood plank by plank, using actual census records, diaries, and maps from the 1870s. The characters aren't just inspired by real people. They talk, scheme, and curse with the same dialects you'd have heard in the actual camp. The language is famously rough, but that's not a gimmick. It's what early frontier English sounded like, a mix of raw poetry and gutter slang. The attention to detail is ruthless. Saloons are ramshackle and filthy. Costumes are sweat-stained and patched, and daily life is about as glamorous as a muddy gold pan. The showrunners even replicated real business rivalries, backroom deals, and the slow encroachment of law and order, all lifted straight from historical sources. What makes Deadwood really sing is its refusal to mythologize the West. You don't get easy heroes or villains, just survivors, hustlers, and dreamers with muddy boots and questionable morals. Historians have called it one of the most authentic looks at frontier life ever put on screen. If you want the truth about the Old West, not just the legend, Deadwood is the one to beat. Just be ready for a world that's as harsh as it is fascinating. Rome, 2005-2007. Forget everything you know about toga parties and postcard ruins. Rome is the period drama that makes ancient history feel sweaty, dangerous, and, let's be honest, a little bit filthy. HBO's Epic didn't just splurge on marble sets and gladiator extras. The show's creators called in a small army of historians, archaeologists, and language experts determined to nail every last detail, from Senate protocol to the color of slave tunics. Costumes aren't some Halloween toga rental. They're hand-stitched, rough to the touch, and dyed with actual Roman pigments. The sets, built from scratch in Italy, recreate real streets, markets, and alleyways based on archaeological maps. No whitewashed marble here. These walls are smeared with grime, graffiti, and the scars of daily life. Even the food looks like it came straight from an ancient recipe scroll. Roasted dormice, anyone? But the real genius, the series refuses to sugarcoat the brutality of Roman politics. You see every shady deal, every knife in the back, and every desperate gamble for power. No grandstanding speeches, just survival in a world where the wrong rumor could get you nailed to a cross. Every major event, the fall of the Republic, the rise of Caesar and Augustus, Cleopatra's last act, unfolds with a messy, lived-in realism. Of course, creative license creeps in now and then, but even Roman history buffs agree. Rome captures the sweat, dirt, and double crosses of the era better than any classroom ever could. If you want your ancient world vibrant, dangerous, and shockingly accurate, Rome is your ticket. A French village. Un village français. 2009-2007. You think you know what World War II looked like, but A French Village is here to mess with your assumptions. This French masterpiece doesn't focus on generals or glamorous resistance leaders. Instead, it drops you right into a tiny, occupied village and dares you to look away as neighbors, friends, and families are forced to make impossible choices. The accuracy is legendary. Every event is built from actual records, memoirs, and testimonies from rural France. The show's creators worked with historians who scrutinized scripts for anachronisms, right down to ration tickets, posters, and the food on the kitchen tables. Civilian clothes are patched and repatched. The town square ages as the war drags on, and even the background extras age naturally over the 7 seasons. There's no black and white morality here. Collaborators aren't always villains, and resistance fighters aren't always heroes. People try to survive, keep secrets, and sometimes do the unthinkable just to make it to another sunrise. The show even jumps years ahead, showing how the scars of war never really fade. What really makes A French Village stand out is its refusal to play nice with your emotions. The heartbreak is quiet, the betrayals feel like a punch, and the victories are rare and hard-won. French critics and historians called it the most realistic WE2 series ever made. If you want to understand not just what happened, but how it felt to live through it, this is essential viewing. Forget the glory stories. A French Village is war as history, not legend. Roots, 1977. When Roots premiered in 1977, it was a television earthquake. This wasn't just another historical drama, it was a reckoning. Based on Alex Haley's painstaking genealogical research, Roots follows the family line from Kunta Kinte's capture in Africa through the generations of slavery and struggle that shaped America's bones. No gloss, no shortcuts, and no smoothing the edges for easy watching. Costumes, sets, and even regional dialects were reconstructed using records, oral histories, and direct input from scholars. The cast, led by LeVar Burton, doesn't just perform, they inhabit the daily realities of their characters. You see the grind of forced labor, the brutality of plantation life, and the tiny moments of rebellion that kept hope alive. The camera doesn't flinch, and neither does the script. Even the music, rooted in traditional African rhythms, was selected to match what would have been heard in the 18th century. Plantation buildings and rural landscapes are replicated with obsessive attention to historical sources, down to the type of crops grown in the fields. The impact? National. Roots sparked hard conversations in living rooms, schools, and Congress. It changed how Americans saw their own past. Historians still use it as a reference point. If you want history with consequences, drama that burns, and accuracy that refuses to fade, Roots is non-negotiable. You don't just watch Roots, you feel it, and you don't forget. Turn, Washington's Spies, 2014-2017. Think the American Revolution was all lanterns and powdered wigs. Turn, Washington's Spies rips up the old playbook and brings you straight into the mud, the paranoia, and the double crosses of 1770s espionage. This isn't the sanitized classroom version. This is spying with a side of danger, hunger, and bad haircuts. The show is based on the true story of the Culper Ring, George Washington's real spy network. Everything from secret codes to the dye on the rebel uniforms is reconstructed from actual correspondence, letters, and spycraft manuals of the day. The script pulls no punches with historical details. You see the actual towns, the real farms, and even the risky signal lanterns hung on actual church steeples. Costuming is a dream for history nerds. No fantasy flourishes here, just ragged homespun for the rebels and crisp regulation gear for the redcoats. Weapons, props, and even the horses match museum records. Real locations were used wherever possible, and when they couldn't be, set designers recreated them using blueprints from the 18th century. But what really sells it? The psychology. Spies are not superheroes. They're farmers, bakers, and tavern keepers desperate enough to risk everything for a letter or a password. The show's portrayal of moral ambiguity, shifting loyalties, and the toll of living a lie is as historically grounded as it gets. If you want the revolution as a living, breathing, risky business, not just a legend on a faded flag, Turn is your inside man. Downton Abbey 2010-2015. You might think Downton Abbey is just another costume drama with too much tea and too little substance, but peel back the soap and you'll find one of TV's most historically obsessive productions. This isn't just a show about posh people and their servants. It's a time machine to Edwardian England, built with the kind of detail that makes historians sit up straight. Julian Fellowes and his team brought in etiquette consultants, real butlers, and historians to reconstruct everything from dining room conversations to the exact way a footman should hold a tray. The household routines, class hierarchies, and even the order of the silverware are rooted in genuine Edwardian manuals. The show tracks real events, like the sinking of the Titanic, World War I, and the Spanish flu pandemic, using them not as backdrops, but as forces that shape every character's fate. Costumes are tailored to match period photos, using fabrics and colors available at the time. The kitchen scenes are authentic to the last rolling pin, with meals prepared according to historical recipes. Even the upstairs-downstairs relationships are scripted from interviews with people who actually worked in country houses before the war. And here's the kicker. Downton Abbey never lets you forget how quickly the world was changing. Servants gain new rights, women push for independence, and old hierarchies crumble. If you want a show that captures not just what history looked like, but how it felt to live through its changes, Downton delivers in spades. The Crown 2016. You think royal drama means tiaras, corgis, and scandal splashed across tabloids? The Crown pulls back the velvet curtain and drags you through the relentless rituals and real-life headaches of Britain's monarchy. Sure, some scenes play up the drama, but creator Peter Morgan runs the tightest historical ship on TV. Every costume is copied from actual royal wardrobes, right down to the last brooch and military sash. Interior sets match floor plans of Buckingham Palace. Advisors included former palace staff, journalists, and British historians, who scrutinized everything from the Queen's speech patterns to the way state dinners were served. Major events, like the Suez Crisis, Princess Margaret's heartbreak, and the Profumo affair, are reenacted with a precision that borders on obsessive. Dialogue is pulled from memoirs, letters, and declassified government records. Even the press pack lurking outside palace gates is staged exactly as it was, decade by decade. The show's commitment to detail goes as far as hiring etiquette coaches for the actors and reconstructing royal routines from the actual court circular. Is there creative license? Of course. But the DNA of every episode is sourced from public record, private diaries, and first-person interviews. The Crown is less about royal fantasy and more about what power, tradition, and public scrutiny actually cost. If you want your history gilded but never sugar-coated, step inside. Mad Men 2007-2015. No, it's not all chain-smoking and martinis. Mad Men is the gold standard for American period drama. Creator Matthew Weiner ran his set like a museum, with every ad campaign, piece of furniture, and office rivalry built from research into real 1960s Madison Avenue. Set designers scoured antique stores and estate sales for period-perfect props. The costumers recreated everything from bras to briefcases using 1960s patterns. Even the lighting was tailored to match the era's photographic film. Cultural details are everywhere. The way secretaries handle switchboards, the casual sexism, and the hush-hush drinking that starts at noon. Real ad copywriters, journalists, and even sociologists were brought in as consultants. Major storylines, like the JFK assassination, civil rights protests, and the arrival of Beatlemania, are integrated with a surgical precision that fans and critics still rave about. Dialogues mirror period slang and workplace etiquette, right down to the passive-aggressive one-liners in board meetings. The show even nails the evolution of office technology, social habits, and, yes, the uncomfortable realities of race and gender politics. Watching Mad Men is like riding a time machine with the filter switched off. It's sharp, it's dark, and it never, ever lets nostalgia smooth over the hard parts. The Nick 2014-2015. Hospitals in 1900 weren't exactly bastions of comfort or safety. The Nick rips away the anesthetic mask and drops you into New York's Knickerbocker Hospital, where modern medicine is being invented on the fly and mistakes are paid for in blood. Director Steven Soderbergh insisted on brutal realism. Medical procedures are choreographed with the help of historians and actual surgeons, using instruments and techniques from the era. Sets are recreated from hospital blueprints, and the show is so accurate that medical schools have screened it for students. But it's not just scalpels and sutures. The Nick tackles real issues of the time, segregation, addiction, corruption, and the messy birth of American public health. Dialogue is peppered with period slang and attitudes. Clive Owen's Dr. Thackeray is modeled on a real, flawed surgical pioneer, and many plot lines are taken straight from medical journals and newspaper reports of the era. Lighting mimics gas lamps and early electricity, and every costume, right down to the nurse's shoes, is copied from real turn-of-the-century catalogs. It's a time when medicine was dangerous, chaotic, and occasionally miraculous. The Nick doesn't flinch, and neither will you. Parade's End 2012. If you want to see World War I and its aftermath without the usual trench cliches, Parade's End delivers. This British miniseries, adapted from Ford Madox Ford's novels, plunges you into the psychological and social earthquake that shook Edwardian England. The details are exquisite. Uniforms are made from authentic wool, sets are built from period blueprints, and props range from real family heirlooms to rare cars sourced from collectors. Historians were consulted on everything from the etiquette of drawing rooms to the horror of the front lines. The language, dress, and mannerisms are lifted straight from Edwardian diaries and letters. You'll see shifting class dynamics, suffragette protests, and the impact of war on both battlefield and home front, all handled with nuance and care. This isn't just about war, it's about how an entire world order cracks and crumbles. Benedict Cumberbatch plays Christopher Tietjens as a man haunted by duty and drowning in change, and the supporting cast feels just as lived in. For a portrait of a lost era, rendered with almost pathological precision, Parade's End stands out. So next time you hear someone moan about historical accuracy on TV, you'll know exactly which dramas don't just play dress up. They bring history roaring back to life, warts and all. Did your favorite make the list? Or did we miss a hidden gem that schools the competition? Drop your picks in the comments, subscribe for more unapologetic deep dives, and share this with every armchair historian you know. After all, the past is only boring if you let it be.